Oh, good morning, good morning. Recapping the weekend. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for making us your SEC football show of choice. Huge win for Mississippi State down in Baton Rouge. Mike Leach's debut, they throw for 600 plus. I know all y'all had that. And their wide receivers looked legit. Not sure that's ever happened where that many of them looked that good in the passing game. And I know they've never had a quarterback that could throw it like that.
I saw deep balls that...
Not that Dak didn't turn into a wonderful passer, and they've had a few other guys that could deliver it, but never a guy... You, as an MSU fan, if you were watching that game, you have never, ever witnessed anything like that from your team. You've had other teams in the league have a pure passer like that, but the ability to spray it around the field, make all the throws, short and intermediate, but then also go down the field to Osiris and some other guys. Shavers, there was a lot of back and forth on the Alabama wide receiver transfer and what he was going to do and be, and he caught a nice touchdown pass too. So everybody got involved except Malik Heath, and he'll have plenty of opportunities. But Blake, that's the best pure passer. I understand scheme and coaching is part of the gumbo.
But you got to throw the football.
You have to be able to throw the football and deliver. And there seemed to be some back and forth during camp. You know, one quote that you heard that I thought really jumped out at us, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, that they said they had to take the Stanford out of him.
Yep.
And I thought that was an interesting quote coming out of the program. Not that they don't have respect for Stanford, but this offense is totally different. One thing that KJ Costello was able to do was process and get the ball out of his hands. I understand there were some fumbles. There was pressure. LSU has great players. But
Ali Gay absolutely ate up Dollar Bill Johnson.
But
he'll be good moving down the line, but that's a superstar.
He
in Ali
did
Gay.
respond at times, though. You're right, though. That was a handful for the young man out of the Mississippi Delta who hasn't really played a whole lot of football.
And Ali Gay is a bona fide day one dude. I mean, that guy's going to be a freak in the NFL, I think. Yeah. So, but like you said,
so the coming
watching
out
the ball
party
come out, it was incredible.
And then the MSU defense, and we're going to have Steve Robertson on in a couple of minutes. The MSU defense, Blake, Brule, Wheat, Marquise Spencer,
Jordan Davis.
Yeah, those guys played well. They don't have Willie Gay, Jeffrey Simmons type guy, Chris Jones, Fletcher Cox, a bona fide superstar, but they got some interesting pieces. And at the point of attack, I thought the defense played really well. And again, they were put in some, bad situations and were able to come out of that and keep the dream alive of upsetting the LSU Tigers. Again, I said the better coaching staff won without a doubt. The best quarterback on the field wasn't close. Not a shot at Miles Brennan. He had a nice day. Was KJ Costello. Out of bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. The SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau insurance agent in any of the 82 counties in Mississippi. You can go local and go with the home team. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app, and you can watch the show right now on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is Out of Bounds Sports. We welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, genespage.com. Steve was at the game. Steve, at what point during the game did you say to yourself, this offense is legit and they're going to be able to attack efficiently and effectively throughout the day?
I would say the answer that probably there in the second quarter, when State took the lead again, I felt like that was probably the moment that I realized that Leach had an idea of how to attack this defense and was going to be able to kind of keep LSU somewhat off balance. And little did I know that it was going to end up being a track meet where they were going to have to chase the state wide receivers all day. But, we kind of spoke about that last week, but that's kind of a byproduct of the offense, is the opportunity to to kind of get in their legs a little bit, and I think State absolutely did that.
You were there. So when did you see Osiris Mitchell mentioned the DBs running out of gas? When did you start seeing that in the second half, where all this attacking space and all the attempts and getting the secondary and linebackers to run sideline to sideline and vertically? When did you see that really having an impact on the LSU defense?
I would say late in the third quarter, and that's the thing you really look at is, you had those back-to-back turnovers, with the interception and the fumble that led to LSU tying the ball game. If State has a little ball security there, this ball game is probably likely over in the fourth quarter. And you could tell, just watching those guys in their body language, going out there to line up, they would run in and off the field. There was just something missing. They didn't have that same intensity. And I'll be honest with you, there was so much woofing going on, early in that ball game. When you got to the fourth quarter and things got really tight, the only people doing talking were in maroon and white.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show and the Coors Light guest line. You're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. How would you describe, were you surprised, shocked? I know you know that Leach and Costello are more than capable, but looking at the whole body of work after the game, what was your reaction on how efficient and the record-setting day by the two?
Well, the first thing that I'll say is I expected LSU to win the ball game. I thought State would be competitive and then possibly have a chance they could get it to the fourth quarter, but there have been some really good Mississippi State teams over the years that have gone to Baton Rouge and come home with a loss, and I didn't expect this one to be any different. But you just kind of got a sense about halfway through the deal that we perhaps have undervalued the talent and the ability of one KJ Costello, and I think that's probably the big takeaway from all of this is that he didn't play clean, and he still set an SEC single-game passing record. What could he do if he takes care of the football? What does he do if his ball placement on that pass with Javonte Payton there in the third quarter when State was up 2 scores with the football? What if he throws that ball more to the sidelines rather than on the inside and Javonte Payton comes down with it? I mean, it's one of those deals when you begin to kind of break it down, you think KJ had a huge day, but he's capable of playing a lot better.
Yeah. How do you describe what happened with the wide receivers? Did they unlock the talent and there was more athleticism than people gave the unit credit for? Or is it Costello and Leach and the staff, Spurrier and so on, elevating their play, or a combo of all?
I think it's the sum of all those things. Had a conversation probably a month ago with a couple of staffers that shared that, some of these wide receivers have kind of been undercoached, that, these guys have some athleticism and some ability, but, they hadn't really been pushed to be better wide receivers. And I thought probably perhaps where I saw the biggest difference is in the releases. Terrell Shavers, Osiris Mitchell, they're able to get off press coverage and get down the field, and they were running by people. And if you look at that last touchdown, Javonte Payton was probably more open than Osiris Mitchell. I mean, it's like the game is on the line. The LSU is doing all they can to get a stop and perhaps force a field goal to stay in the ball game. And you got State guys just running wide open in the secondary. I mean, if there was ever a moment right there when you saw the difference in the trajectory of those two programs, it's that play right there.
So you and I discussed Mitchell the last couple of weeks, and what was going on with Leach in the psychology part? Was he trying to motivate him because he knew there was more there?
Only Mike can speak for himself, but I'll tell you and I had this discussion last week when they named Terrell Shavers as the starter, that I thought that this was perhaps, probably a ploy to light a fire under Osiris Mitchell. And I wrote about this yesterday. Rather than pouting, rather than going into his shell, he responds in one of the greatest games of his career on one of the biggest stages that he's ever played on. That, to me, that's good coaching. And sometimes you have to do that. And I think it's also, too, a player being willing to say, you know what, I don't have to accept where I am on the depth chart. When I get my opportunity, I'm going to cash in, and he certainly did. And it's one of those things, too, you look at his transformation. This is a guy that nobody wanted. This is a receiver that State signed in June, 4 months after National Signing Day, because Billy Gonzalez and Dan Mullen had whiffed on receivers the entire recruiting process, and they have to go back late post-signing day and sign Reggie Todd and Osiris Mitchell. And if you had told me then, hey, that kid is going to be the guy to score the game-clinching touchdown at LSU, I would have never believed it. But that's what good coaching can do, is you take a guy with some potential and you coach it out of him. And I'm really happy for the kid, really happy for everybody that supports Mississippi State today, because I think everybody, probably most realistic fans, said, you know what, we can compete, but we're not going to go down there and beat the defending national champions on the day they hang a banner. I mean, I think just the emotional theater behind the whole thing favored LSU, but I don't think Mike Leach buys into that stuff. I think Mike's like, you know what, we're going to go run our scheme. We don't care who you are. We don't care who you put out there on the field. We're going to go do what we do, and then we'll see where the chips fall. And I thought they did it exceptionally well, but still had some teachable moments because, again, you know, you're -2 in turnovers and you run for 9 yards and give up, 3-4 sacks?
Right.
You can be better.
Steve Robertson recapping the game. He was in Baton Rouge on Saturday. Mississippi State with the win, 44-34. KJ Costello sets an SEC record for passing yardage at 623 yards. I don't know if MSU fans still really understand or can comprehend what they were watching, and it looked really good for most of the day. I want to stay on Osiris Mitchell real quick, and then Blake's got a question. Give me his measurables. I mean, he's never been used. He's a developmental guy. I mean, what is he, 6'4", 6'5", and what does he run? Because he ran away from some LSU defenders too.
Yeah, I mean, he's a legit 6'5". I mean, that's, you add the hair in there, he's a little bit taller, you know, but, you know, he's a 6'5" guy, and, you know, probably comes in somewhere around 200 pounds. But he saw a burst on Saturday that I don't know that I had seen before from him. And I think that's a byproduct of coaching and physical conditioning and all this running that they do, because he hit the Jets and he just ran right on by that LSU DB that actually had the angle. And that really kind of surprised me. I thought, you know what, he may be kind of limited and run after the catch, but he showed there a couple times that he has found something. And I think it's one of those deals too, where it goes back to, you know, all those workouts and midnight maneuvers and Leach Beach and that sort of stuff. And, you know, the players initially were a little bit, you know, reluctant with all that stuff because there was a culture shift. Now, all of a sudden, they're being accountable and asked to do some things to make them uncomfortable. And then you saw the byproduct of that on Saturday when the game was on the line. Mississippi State, without a doubt, was a tougher team.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show in the Coors Light guest line. You're listening to 105.9 The Zone. Blake?
Yeah, Steve, I could talk about, you know, tossing for 605 touchdowns all day. But I do have a question, because we kind of mentioned this as the weak point coming into the season for Mississippi State, and I thought it was impressive. Can you talk about why Zach Arnett in the front of that 3-3-5 defense was able to get pressure, 7 sacks on Miles Brennan? Was that all on the offensive line? Was it all on Brennan holding the football too long? Kind of talk about that.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's one of those deals where I think the secondary also, because of the fact there were so many times that nobody was open, the rush finally got there. And, you know, State's actually recruited pretty well, and that was really kind of one of those keys to the game, is how would Kobe Jones and Marquise Spencer kind of embrace being starters really for the first time. And while Kobe didn't fill up the box score, Marquise Spencer was out there with a couple of sacks and really kind of influenced Brennan most of the day. And I think you got to give Jeff Phelps a lot of credit. He's a guy too that I think a lot of State fans were kind of on the fence about. But his group went out there, even when State didn't bring a lot of blitz, they were out there harassing the LSU quarterback. And listen, some of that too is the fact that Brennan's a little bit green, despite the fact he's been around for a few years. But that was probably one of the biggest surprises to me, is how effectively State pressured the quarterback. And we talked about that as the key to victory last week. In order for State to win this football game, they had to go out there and make him uncomfortable, because if you let those guys pitch and catch, they're going to beat you. And I thought State did a great job in every facet of that part of the game. Is they rushed the passer and they really contested those catches, and very rarely did you see a LSU guy just kind of running free.
Who was your MVP on the defensive side of the football?
Man, that's a great question. I think I'd have to go with Marquise Spencer, just because of the fact that he was consistently beating his guy and getting his guy back into the quarterback. But a lot of guys that kind of stood out that maybe we hadn't talked as much about. Tyrus Weed, I thought, was very impactful, and he's a guy that hasn't been mentioned a whole lot in our media sessions with the Mississippi State coaching staff. And that's exciting in and of itself, because these guys, now they've got a big win, the buy-in is going to be that much more important, because now they realize this coaching staff knows what they're doing. And so rather than being somewhat reluctant to buy into everything, now it's like, you know what, let me go ahead and put my personal feelings aside and just kind of settle in, because this could be a pretty wild ride.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, genespage.com, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. We're recapping the huge win for MSU over LSU, 44-34 in Baton Rouge. Taking Costello out, who was your MVP on offense?
I think I go with Osiris Mitchell. I think that he was a guy, obviously, that you could say had not reached his full potential. But to be fair, I think there was somewhat of a ceiling on that. You think, this guy's probably a G5 guy that ends up on an SEC team by default because State just had to have a receiver. He showed some real promise on Saturday. And I think when you look at that group, you can go up and down the page there. I mean, you had a couple of drops. Mitchell had one, Peyton had one, but by and large, they did a great job, elevating and contesting for the football. And they're only going to get better from here. But I think Mitchell was probably the biggest surprise for me. But also, too, just because of the fact that anytime that you needed a big play on third down, it seemed like he was always there.
So the Mississippi State receivers made several contested catches, and I want to give them credit for that. But can you ever remember a time – and Dan had success against some really good teams throwing the football, but you still felt like there was 0 to no separation even when that was happening with wide receivers or tight ends. Can you remember a time against a top 5 elite recruiter that MSU was playing where there was that much space and separation on some of the pitching and catching between Costello and the wide receiver, Steve?
Not really. Maybe you go back to 2015, back when State had Donald Gray and Fred Ross and Deronye Wilson. I think then that's probably the most productive group you've had in a while. But it was one of those deals where you just didn't expect to see, in key moments, to have Mississippi State wide receivers gaining that kind of separation. That's the thing. I think it goes back to coaching. You've had the NFL guys. You had back-to-back NFL guys, Luke Getsy and Michael Johnson, coaching these wide receivers. And then Dave Nickel and Steve Spurrier show up here with the same group and make them look completely different, get better level of production. Technique-wise, they're better. Production-wise, they're better. I just think it all boils down to coaching. I think it's as simple as that. I think they're simply being coached at a higher level and held to a higher standard.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show. Blake?
Yes, Steve, I realized that yesterday was record-breaking and all that, but when you look at what KJ did, as we mentioned, throwing the deep ball, I want to talk about what I think you mentioned. The reports were that he was struggling with his touch, and I thought he threw some balls, like you said, the one to Shavers was really nice. The one to Osiris Mitchell on the 43-yard touchdown or whatever, where he had to put it an inch over a defender's hand, and then the 3rd and maybe 15 to Caleb Gardner, where he had to touch it in right over 2 defenders. Can you talk about what I think everybody said was KJ's weakest point coming into the season, which was that touch pass ability?
Yeah, I didn't think that was evident on Saturday. I agree with you. That was one thing that Mike Leach brought up, is that sometimes he has big arm disease. That some of those quarterbacks that have the huge arm, they don't throw with a lot of touch and feel. And I just didn't think that was the case, especially on those third down plays when he had to somewhat, step up and get mobile. He didn't let the pass rush speed him up and then him overthrow. There was one to Mitchell I thought he kind of let get away early in the ball game. But, he was a guy that pretty much stayed on target. And I was real impressed with that, too. And you mentioned the Tyrell Shavers throw. I don't know if he could have walked out there and dropped it any better than he did. And that's, again, the thing you go back to, the first time this guy's, throwing a football in a competitive game in over a year. And so now that he's had this game and this level of confidence and built these relationships with these receivers, what will they do offensively against an average SEC team? Not an elite SEC team, because that's who we just faced. And granted, Derek Stingley wasn't there, and I know that's the big disclaimer now. That's the whole thing. Everybody's like, well, Stingley wasn't there. You know what it is. How many times has Mississippi State gone out and played a game without a key player in the ball game too? You know, that's part of the game. Attrition, injuries, turnovers, part of the game of football over the course of the season. But I'm eager to see what they can do this weekend with Arkansas, who does not have anywhere close to the same level of talent on defense as LSU.
Yeah. So, Steve, think about that. LSU has more talent. They won the field position battle and the turnover battle. And Mississippi State won. Mississippi State had the better quarterback by far and away, the better coaching staff by far and away, and had more explosive plays. But still, you run the numbers. That's I don't know how often that happens between a mid to late 20s recruiter and a top 5 recruiter in the SEC going at it. Yeah, how many times has I've got 3 minutes? Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. How many times has Mississippi State been a 16 or 17 point favorite in an SEC game? Not often.
Well, I thought not often. And one of the last times that I remember, I guess, was what the 17 Egg Bowl. You know, when Matt Luke came up here and won. I guess it was 17 Egg Bowl when Matt Luke and those guys came up here and won and got the job. State was a huge favorite in that game, and so I don't buy a whole lot into these point spreads like other people do. I think Mississippi State is the better team. I think 17 is probably too low. To be quite honest with you, I don't think Arkansas was going to have the offensive firepower to kind of get into a shootout. They have some intriguing pieces. I like Burks, and I think Rakeem Boyd's one of the most undervalued players in the SEC because he's played on a horrible team. But, State's going to have to stop the run and make Felipe Franks beat them with his arm, and I don't think that he's capable of doing that. But I don't think that Arkansas has anywhere near the defensive talent they're going to need to slow this thing down. I think it's going to boil down to how well can Mississippi State execute the offense. If State can go out there with a high level of proficiency in the passing game, this game will not be close.
I think another 10 plus or maybe 15,000 plus people may go to Starkville this weekend, even though they can't get in the stadium, Steve, after that win.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that just want to be around it. I mean, it's like, you've been cooped up for so long, and even if you can't make the ball game, you just want to be in Starkville and, maybe go by Campus Bookmart, Bulldog Burger, and buy yourself some grub and get some maroon and white gear just to kind of be around it all. There's a lot of people, as you know, Bo, that have a second home here, and even if you can't get tickets, maybe you come up here just to kind of enjoy Starkville and enjoy the atmosphere, because I can tell you yesterday there's a lot of electricity in the air. Everywhere you went, everybody wants to talk about what the Bulldogs did, because most people expected us to lose that ball game, and now you think, man, all things are possible.
Steve Robertson, the Boneyard Podcast, genespage.com on the Coors Light guest line. Steve, we appreciate it. We'll catch up again later in the week. Thanks, man.
See you soon.
All right, Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN, 105.9 The Zone, WRKS. Recapping the MSU-LSU game where MSU upsets LSU is about a 17-point underdog. KJ Costello, SEC record for passing yards in his first game ever at Mississippi State. So the Mike Leach debut was a grand slam. We're going to go around the SEC in the next segment. And, yes, I've got to get to Ole Miss, but when a game like that happens, you got to lead with a big win over a top 10 team. We'll go around the horn with the SEC next.